Well, look, when during the pandemic, we were at historic lows. You said you had one recently, it's 2.2.
Yes.
I'd be if I was in Vegas and I put my money down. When do you think that was done, Don? I'd say probably during the pandemic when we had historic lows. Well, unless people were living under a rock, they took advantage of those low rates.
Right.
So they refinanced. Now, fast forward, getting divorced. Like, well, I don't want to walk away from this 2.2% mortgage. Well, I've got one in Broward County right now where he's got a 2.75% mortgage. Says, Don, I don't want to walk away from it. I said, I wouldn't either. Let's take a look at what your potential solutions are. Well, as it turns out, there was other debt obligations besides just the mortgage. There was credit cards. There was a couple of vehicles, but the credit cards were big. So I'm like, well, if we're talking about rate, let's take a look at those rates.
Right.
Because oftentimes when I hear about rate, I'm like, okay, let's just stop here and have a little conversation. What does that rate mean? And typically what it means is when we really dig deep into it a little bit, it means a lower monthly payment. Because typically we're going from a 2 household income to 1. That low rate represents a low monthly payment. Okay, if we're talking about monthly payment, let's talk about overall cash flow.
Right.
What other debt obligations do you have on your personal balance sheet? Or what other debt obligations are being assigned to you from the marital balance sheet? And then let's take a overall holistic look at 30,000 foot level. Okay, let's take a look at this. What are your total monthly debt obligations? Would it potentially make sense to maybe consolidate those into one monthly payment?
Right.
And by doing so, this does require a little cooperation from the other spouse, but we can actually include that as part of the marital settlement agreement. And by doing so, now we're going to say, hey, wait a minute, let's take a look over here at the IRS, because they allow you to itemize certain expenses throughout the course of the year. In the context of this conversation, those include your mortgage interest expense and your property taxes. Okay, well, your marital status your filing status is going to change in the eyes of the IRS from married to either joint or single, or head of household or single. Let's take a look at those standard deductions. And if you were to refinance, let's take a look at what those itemized deductions would amount to. And does it make sense from a tax filing status? Because I say, listen, if you were to make $80,000 here in Florida and you were to make $80,000 in the state of New York on a tax adjusted basis, is that the same amount of income? Absolutely not. They've got a state tax and we don't.
Right.
So let's take a look at a tax adjusted of that rate from 2.2 to 6.5. Oftentimes, like in this example of this individual in Broward County, his tax savings are going to be in the ballpark of $8,555. And his monthly cash flow is going to improve by about $456 a month.
Can't beat that.
So that's why I understand and many times it does. There's 3 of them right now where I said, no, hold on to that rate. Doesn't make sense. But if you have an equalization payment, equity buyout, maybe we'll take a look at these home equity lines of credits or the home equity loans. There's a plethora of solutions. That's why we want to make that proverbial informed decision before you go down a rabbit hole, just take a mortgage application and do a refinance.